Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in today's video we are going to look at this GCK Ground Combat Knife from Buck Knives. Now I don't have a lot of Buck knives, but I do have a few, and the Buck knives that I've used I've greatly enjoyed. And I was doing some research, I came across Aaron from Gideon Tactical's video on the GCK, and well, based on his advice, I thought this would be a good blade to add to my collection, so I picked one up, and here you'll see this awesome offering from Buck Knives. What I've done is a whole bunch of field use using this GCK, and I do have to say I have greatly enjoyed this knife. It performs extremely well after good substantial field use. And so I have a whole bunch of footage that I'm going to roll in. We're going to take a look at this footage, then we're going to get back into the studio and I'm going to go through this in some detail. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. And so here you can see the Buck Knives Ground Combat Knife being used for some Firecraft tasks. Now for me, a knife in this size absolutely has to be able to carve and carve well. And the GCK doing a wonderful job. Here you can see I am using gloves as there's snow on the ground and it's a little bit cold outside. So the first test for me is how will this perform with gloves on. And overall I have to say very comfortable. It fills out my hand fairly well. It has good quality indexing, a good angle and geometry, and is capable of doing some nice quality slicing tasks. So here, getting myself a baton and ready for some harder field use using the GCK. It's doing a nice job. And you can see indexing up on the guard, doing some nice quality slicing tasks, taking some pretty good bite on the wood. This definitely did a nice job to get me my baton ready for some splitting tasks. But now getting into the baton work, here you'll see using the GCK to wedge nicely down through the wood. 5160 is a good quality steel, and being a spring steel can definitely take the punishment. Now the overall grind geometry and angle of the blade does a wonderful job wedging down and through the wood, and you can see here splitting time after time after time with ease. And looking at this with a little bit of detail, you can see a nice defined crack running all the way down the wood, easily splitting these pieces with zero difficulty. Just a wonderful, wonderful job doing these Firecraft tasks. So batoning with the GCK, the 5160 steel, and that Boss heat treat, no problem at all. But with a Tanto, I definitely want to get into some stabbing. So what do I think about stabbing tasks? Well, with a Tanto tip, obviously this does do a wonderful job splitting down and through the wood, penetrating deep and splitting the wood with ease. However, the one thing I can tell you is you do definitely need to be a little bit careful. And even though I'm wearing gloves here, I was a little bit nervous. Looking at the shape of the handle, because it's not overly sized, you do definitely need to be careful. And without a significant pronounced guard, it's something to pay attention to. But in terms of the carving tasks here, getting into some finer tasks, subtle little curls, trying to get some tinder to start my fire, working and processing down through the wood. Well, here wearing the gloves again, feels nice in my hands, fills out my hands wonderfully. The edge geometry is great on this knife. It's really easy to find the edge and working down through the wood with ease to get some nice quality chunks to start my fire. With reasonably deep bite, you can definitely bear down, get some good healthy pieces if you so choose. And here you'll see just really working down through the wood, getting some nice heavy curls. And this is going to be a perfect way to process this wood down to build my tinder bundle. But what about working without the gloves? That's going to be the most important test for me. Getting a little more touch, a little more feel, and really getting some good grip on the handle with these micarta scales. So trying to get some finer curls, working with a little more finesse, planing down through the wood and getting some nice refined curls. Now, these aren't the finest or tightest curls. That's just me. It's not the knife. Sometimes I have good success, other times I struggle a little bit. Not a big deal. You can definitely see the ground combat knife doing a great job with the carving and slicing tasks. But now really taking my time, easing up a bit, trying to get those nice, refined, and dainty curls. You know, the ones that are real easy to catch a spark and get the fire started. And the ground combat knife doing a wonderful job. Now you do have a slightly different blade shape with the Tanto versus the drop point. Either one's going to do a wonderful job. And that saber grind is a good balance between a stout blade and a slicey blade. I am a big fan of a saber grind, and the ground combat knife, again, doing a mighty nice job. But all in all, nice pile of refined curls. Let's get a little bit closer to starting the fire. So what about that fluff? Using the back side of the knife spine to try to do some scraping tasks. This is not the sharpest spine, but as you can see, it is capable of doing the work. Now with a coating, you are going to reduce the overall quality of the scraping. However, this is, again, doing a pretty nice job. You'll notice there are a couple of spots on the blade that have a slightly thicker stock. Here, using that particular section of the knife to do the bulk of the scraping, you'll see I am getting some quality fuzz on the stick, planing it down and adding it to my pile. Now what about fat wood? I always like my field knives to be able to process down on the fat wood with ease. So using this right now to split down through some of this fat wood and to get it into smaller pieces. And you can see at times I get a little bit close to the blade edge. I just need to be careful and mindful of that blade edge at all times. But carving down into some of the candied fat wood, doing a nice job carving. This is doing a wonderful job getting some nice healthy chunks off the fat wood. These are instrumental in my ability to get this sparked with ease. And again, back to the scraping tasks, getting my thumb on the side of the knife with some alternate grips, using the knife again to scrape nicely on the fat wood, getting some good fuzz and fluff. This is what's really capable of taking a nice spark off my ferro rod. But speaking of ferro rod here, just doing a little more scraping, trying to get some little bits and pieces of the magnesium off of my rod and into the pile. That definitely aids in the overall heat as you're sparking and the ability to get this started with ease. But once that's ready, well, let's start to rip this, get this fire started. And you'll notice here with the ground combat knife, no problem at all. In fact, a very easy spark on the ferro rod, and this fire is now completely underway. And so now taking a look at the ground combat knife in some detail. So here you will see, again, the 5 1/4 inch blade in 5160 and the Boss heat treat. That's the first thing. Obviously, a nice job coming from Buck and Boss. They have had a winning formula using the Boss heat treat, and that is definitely the case here with the ground combat knife. Now here you'll see it does have a Cerakote finish. This is a Buck factory finish. When it came, it was in pretty good shape overall. Couple funny, I would say, like little pock marks here and there and slight inconsistencies, but nothing of really substantial quality issues. A little bit of a concern, but not too big of a deal overall. I would say definitely a quality finish. Now you will notice that some of it at this point has rubbed off from hard use, just forcing its way through the wood, not a big deal, and pretty much on those high wear areas. So on both sides, right where that saber grind meets up with that flat grind, not a huge deal, just a little bit of wear. The 5160 holding up extremely well, still nice and sharp. Overall, pretty good edge retention, I do have to say. I am a big fan of 5160. I think it's a great steel for hard use applications, and so on this ground combat knife, it is a perfect offering. Now the handle's absolutely magnificent. I think they do a great job. This particular pattern I think is wonderful. You'll see that it is in essence a 3D machined pattern. Very, very cool. And I also very much like their hardware selection. So these gorgeous, just nice flathead screws here, working very nicely. Now you only end up with a star bit on one side. I have not personally tried to remove these to see what happens. If that's the case, where these are just simply flat with no screw heads, you need to be a little bit careful. I hope these don't spin. They shouldn't. They should be properly indexed inside the handle, but that's for somebody else to figure out, I guess. Now you will notice just a little bit of the tang is exposed beyond the edge of the scales. Not a big deal. Everything is nicely softened and chamfered the way it needs to be. Just rounded out enough that it's comfortable, and actually the handle very much aids in good positive grip. The fact that it has so much texture, it has a lot of texture as a material to begin with, being micarta, but that 3D machining really adding significant texture. Now, the one thing I think is just a little bit funny, the guard is a little undersized for something that I would say is considered to be a combat knife, just a little bit. I found that if you're not careful, and especially in those stabbing tasks, I did need to be cognizant of not sliding off of the handle down onto the blade. But overall, I do have to say it is very comfortable, and the way everything is nicely shaped and contoured works very, very well. The handle does neck down a little bit towards the back, but I would say that overall aids in comfort. Now, this isn't going to do much for you in the way of chopping tasks, nor would I necessarily expect that out of a 5.5-inch blade, but you could, in theory, do that if you wanted to. My suggestion at that point is just utilize the lanyard. And having that exposed tang on the back of the pommel, you can definitely do some smashing or cracking action if you so choose. But overall, I do have to say, I like this knife quite a bit. It's been very comfortable and is a nice sized field knife. Now, one place I did need to be a little bit careful, I found a couple times I kind of got myself a little bit close up on the blade just because of the blade depth. Most of my knives in this size class are actually a little bit deeper in the blade, which means once I start getting my thumb into some alternate grips, it's a little bit further away from the cutting edge. I did have a couple of occasions where I was a little bit, and I would say sloppy or lackadaisical, where I found I was getting a little close to the cutting edge in some of my tasks, just a little closer than I would have liked. So for me, I just need to think about that. As I said, most of my knives in this size class do have a deeper blade depth. So that's just something to consider. But I do like the size. I think it keeps it nice and compact, very slicey and capable, and overall just a great blade to have on your hip. And the sheath too is very well done. Here you'll see a plastic molded sheath. This is not Kydex, but it is a type of thermoplastic, fairly thick, and overall does a nice job with retention. As you see here, inserting the knife, a good positive click, very firm, and apart from this little lanyard wiggling around, no rattle at all. Literally fits in perfectly. And here, just nicely done. No concerns whatsoever that the knife is going to come out. I like the fact that you could carry this inverted. Now, for me personally, I have used this on the Molly backer the entire time. I have not changed this out, but you have a ton of options. You will notice this does have two means of retention. So both the retention in the sheath itself, but also the strap over the top. Now, because this sheath has a couple of different Molly lashing points, you will notice that right now this just leaves a tiny little bit on top that's barely getting some bite. However, you can adjust this. So as you look here, there are 3 different straps that this can feed through. I have it on the lower 2 straps because I do like a lower dangle, but you could in theory move it up, which at that point would aid in retention. So generally speaking, very nicely done, very high quality. I am happy with the construction. And if there was one little nitpick, this right here is the, I would say it's the hook side of hook and loop, which means it's a little bit rough. It would actually be pretty cool, and I don't think it could easily be done, but I would say just having the softer side here, it would take a little reworking, and everything would have a pro and con. Actually, at that point, you'd end up with a hook on the back side. I would really love the idea of putting a morale patch or something on there, but you really can't. So just, I guess, a suggestion for Buck, just having maybe a couple of pieces of Velcro that you could put over here, you know, a Buck logo or something like that, or just plain tan, simply to keep that from being rough so it doesn't abrade on your jacket or on your other equipment. I think that would be a little bit helpful, but that's just being nitpicky. So there you have it, some field use with this ground combat knife. Very cool. Now the first thing is, obviously I wasn't using this for combat purposes, but rather the Firecraft tasks, and I do have to say it performed very well. I believe that because of the saber grind and the shape of the blade, it did a wonderful job splitting the wood. The overall size for a reasonably compact knife, it feels great in the hand, and it did a wonderful job with the slicing tasks. So overall, I am very pleased. For me personally, I really do like the drop point design more for the Firecraft tasks versus the Tanto, but because the Tanto has a couple areas with a little bit of a thicker stock, I thought for me it would be a better choice for batoning, where typically what I do is Firecraft tasks with my hard use fixed blades. So overall, I think the drop point design is a great option. I just think that with the unsharpened swedge on the top, it left it a little bit limited, and it would beat up the baton a little too much for my needs. But all in all, fitting wonderfully in my hands, feeling very, very good. I have to say, I am very pleased with this Buck Knives Ground Combat Knife. A great addition to their lineup, and I hope to see many, many more knives in the Ground Combat series. So who's to say? I mean, I like the choice of materials, the Cerakote, the overall fit and finish, and the quality and style of the blade, not to mention the sheath. The sheath performing extremely, extremely well. So all in all, just a great package. So all right guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. Hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.